This is the story of how I exposed my cheating wife's affair with a competitor and her plan to destroy my company. When I married Jenna 8 years ago, she was everything I thought I wanted: ambitious, intelligent, stunningly beautiful. She was a top manager at a prestigious firm, and I, a quieter, introverted programmer, admired her drive as much as her charm. Our lives seemed perfectly complementary. While she navigated high stakes boardrooms, I thrived in the world of algorithms and lines of code. My startup had just gained traction, a project I'd nurtured into a software platform with the potential to disrupt the market. Life was a whirlwind of late nights and early mornings, but it was rewarding. Then the whispers started. Jenna's behavior had shifted subtly at first: missed dinners, late night meetings, and a sharpness to her tone that hadn't been there before. She stopped asking about my work and started locking her phone, something she'd never done before. The thought that she might be hiding something gnawed at me, but I silenced those doubts. I trusted her, even when she didn't seem to trust me. It wasn't until her office party that my suspicions took root. Jenna introduced me to a sleek, confident man named Darren, a partner at one of my company's competitors. The way they exchanged glances was fleeting, but it was there, a flicker of something more than professional respect. I told myself I was imagining things, that jealousy was a slippery slope I didn't want to descend. But the evidence started stacking up. A text notification that she swiped away too quickly, hushed phone calls in the middle of the night, and an over-explained work trip to San Francisco. Then came the bombshell. A routine server check in my company revealed a breach. Someone had accessed proprietary algorithms and shared them with a rival company. It wasn't just a security breach, it was sabotage. And the patterns led to someone with access to my home network, Jenna. I spent the next few weeks quietly piecing the puzzle together. I couldn't confront her, not yet, not without proof. It was during one of her late night work meetings that I made my move. I accessed her laptop while she was out. What I found made my stomach drop. Emails, dozens of them. Correspondence with Darren about shared objectives, encrypted files she'd forwarded, and worst of all, a photo of them together in a hotel suite. Her betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional, calculated, and vicious. I couldn't breathe as I stared at her laptop screen. The emails were damning, but vague enough to leave room for doubt. They referenced mutual goals and strategic alliances, but avoided specifics. Darren's name appeared often, always in the context of work, yet the tone carried a subtle intimacy that set my teeth on edge. I closed the laptop and stepped away, my pulse pounding in my ears. Was I reading too much into it? Could there be a plausible explanation? Part of me clung to the hope that this was some sort of misunderstanding, but the deeper part of me, the part that felt the weight of every stolen glance and unspoken word, knew better. Still, I needed more. I wasn't just going to blow up my marriage or jeopardize my company based on circumstantial evidence. If I was going to confront Jenna, I needed irrefutable proof. But how? The answer came to me in the form of an old friend, Alex, a cybersecurity expert who owed me a favor. I called him under the pretense of needing help securing my network after the breach. As we spoke, I casually mentioned that someone had accessed files from my home network and asked if he could help identify the source. "Leave it to me," Alex said. "I'll need a day or two." While Alex worked his magic, I kept up appearances at home. Jenna's mood seemed lighter, almost cheerful. She was spending even more time at work, or so she claimed. And when she was home, she was glued to her phone. Her laughter echoed from the living room one evening, soft and private, as if she were sharing a joke with someone on the other end of the line. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, just Michelle," she replied without looking up. Michelle was her coworker, someone she often named when explaining her late nights. It was plausible, but something about her smile didn't feel right. It was too warm, too genuine. A smile meant for someone else. I nodded and walked away, pretending to believe her. My stomach churned. When Alex called back a few days later, his tone was grim. "You were right," he said. "The access came from inside your house. Specifically, Jenna's devices." I felt a strange mix of validation and devastation. The betrayal was real, but now I had to decide what to do about it. Alex continued, "There's more. Some of the data was sent to an external server. I traced it to an IP address linked to, get this, Ascentech, Darren's company. Can you find out what was sent? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll try, Alex replied, but it looks like some of the files were encrypted before being sent. It'll take time to crack them. Time was the one thing I didn't have. Jenna's behavior was escalating, and the longer I waited, the more damage she could do. But I couldn't rush into this unprepared. I needed a plan. That night, I lay awake next to her, staring at the ceiling as her steady breathing filled the silence. My mind raced with questions. Was she aware of the damage she was causing, or did she think her actions were harmless? Did she even care? And the most haunting question of all, was it all a game to her? Morning came too quickly, and with it an idea. If Jenna thought she was the one pulling the strings, I'd let her believe that, for now. But behind the scenes, I would unravel her web of lies one thread at a time. Part 3. The Game of Masks. I started observing Jenna more closely, though I made sure not to let on that anything was amiss. If she noticed me watching her, she didn't let it show. She carried on as if everything was fine, smiling, laughing, making plans. But those moments of levity only deepened the ache in my chest. It was the laughter of someone living a double life, and I had yet to figure out how deep the second half went. Her work trips became more frequent. I began noting the details, the length of her calls, the timing of her texts, the places she claimed to be. Every piece of information felt like a breadcrumb leading to the truth. One night, as she packed for another trip, I casually asked, "Where are you off to this time?" "Chicago," she replied without hesitation. "Big conference. I'll be back Sunday evening." She smiled at me over her suitcase, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Sounds exciting," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "What's the conference about?" "Just the usual stuff. Networking strategy sessions," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "Nothing you'd find interesting." Her answer was too rehearsed, too polished. And her choice of Chicago? It didn't sit right with me. Darren's company had a regional office there. Coincidence? I doubted it. The next day, I called Alex again. "I need a favor," I told him. "Can you track Jenna's movements in real time?" "That's tricky," he said, "but doable. I'll send you a GPS tracker, plant it on her car, and I'll take care of the rest." When the package arrived, I felt a pang of guilt. Spying on my wife wasn't something I ever imagined I'd do. But this wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was about my company, my future, and the betrayal that threatened to unravel everything I'd worked for. The opportunity came on the morning of her departure. While she showered, I slipped the tracker into the lining of her luggage. My hands shook as I worked, but I managed to get it in place before she came out of the bathroom. "All set?" I asked as she grabbed her bag. "Yep," she said with a quick kiss on my cheek. "See you Sunday." I watched her drive away, a storm of emotions swirling inside me. Love, anger, fear, they all mingled together, leaving me on edge. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, some way this wasn't what it seemed. But the evidence was mounting, and soon I'd know for sure. That evening, Alex sent me a link to a live tracking page. I stared at the blinking dot that represented Jenna's car, following its path as it moved through the city. Sure enough, it headed straight for the airport. I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe she really was going to Chicago. But then something unexpected happened. The dot stopped moving long before it reached the terminal. Instead, it lingered at a nearby hotel. My heart sank. "Alex," I called him immediately. "She's at a hotel, not the airport. Can you pull anything else?" "Hold on," he said. A few minutes later, he came back. "She checked in under her name, but there's another reservation linked to her account. Darren Grant. Same room." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. I clenched my fists, my vision narrowing as rage bubbled up inside me. "Thanks, Alex," I said, my voice tight. "I'll handle it from here." I spent the night pacing the house, torn between storming the hotel and biding my time. Confronting her now might satisfy my anger, but it wouldn't give me the answers I needed. Jenna was careful, methodical. If I wanted to expose her, I had to be just as calculated. By morning, I had a plan. I'd let her believe she was in control, that her lies were still intact. But behind the scenes, I'd gather every piece of evidence I could. By the time she came home, She wouldn't know what hit her. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. The tension is climbing and the revelations are just beginning. The weekend dragged on like an eternity. Every time I refreshed the tracking page, Jenna's dot remained at the same hotel. No movement, no pretense of heading to the airport or a conference venue. It was as if she'd dropped the act entirely, confident in the cover of distance. And my supposed naivety. I didn't sleep much. Every scenario played in my mind. Her laughing with Darren over drinks, their whispers in some dimly lit corner. Each thought tightened the knot in my stomach, but I held firm. This wasn't the time for rash decisions. I needed to see the full picture before I made my move. Sunday evening, as promised, she returned. I heard her car pull into the driveway and forced myself to look calm as she walked in. Her smile was bright, her tone upbeat. "Hey, honey," she said, setting her bag down. "Miss me?" "Of course," I replied, managing a small smile. "How was Chicago?" "Busy," she said, exhaling dramatically. "Non-stop meetings. I'm exhausted." I studied her face as she spoke. There were no tells, no signs of guilt or hesitation. She was a master of deception. I helped her unpack, subtly checking her belongings for anything out of place. But she was meticulous. There were no suspicious receipts, no stray items to give her away. I realized then that Jenna wasn't just careless in her betrayal, she was methodical, calculating. The next few days passed uneventfully, at least on the surface. Jenna returned to her routine of late nights and distant smiles. But behind the scenes, I was laying the groundwork for my own strategy. Alex delivered another bombshell. "I decrypted some of the files Jenna sent to Darren," he said. "It's bad. These are proprietary algorithms, stuff you haven't even patented yet. If a Centech gets their hands on this, they could launch before you." The words hit me like a blow. Years of work, countless sleepless nights, all at risk because of Jenna. "Can you trace her communications?" I asked. "Already working on it," Alex said. "But it's tricky. She's using encrypted channels." I nodded, my jaw tight. Jenna had covered her tracks well, but I wasn't about to let her win. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. One evening, Jenna left her laptop open while she went to shower. Normally, she locked it, but this time she must have been distracted. I seized the moment, scrolling through her emails. There it was, an invitation to a business dinner with Darren later that week. The restaurant was local, a high-end spot Jenna and I had dined at once for. This was my chance. If Jenna thought she could play me, I'd let her believe it, just long enough to expose her. Thursday night arrived. Jenna dressed impeccably, her smile radiant as she prepared to leave. "Late meeting tonight?" I asked casually. "Yeah," she said, avoiding my gaze. "Might run a little late. Don't wait up." "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. The moment she left, I followed. I parked a block away from the restaurant, keeping my distance as she entered. Through the window, I saw her join Darren at a candlelit table. They laughed, leaned in close, their chemistry undeniable. I snapped a few photos from my car, my hands trembling. This was the proof I needed, not just for the personal betrayal, but for the professional one too. But I wasn't done yet. I texted Alex. "I need you to remotely access her phone, tonight." Inside, Jenna and Darren sipped wine, oblivious to the storm brewing. My heart raced as I watched, torn between anger and heartbreak. Part of me wanted to burst in and confront them, to demand answers. But the wiser part of me knew this wasn't the moment. By the time Jenna left the restaurant, I was already home, sitting in the living room with her laptop open. Alex had come through, pulling logs of her recent communications. It was worse than I imagined. Explicit plans to deliver more files to Darren, along with comments mocking my work. "Think he suspects anything?" Darren had written in one text. "Not a clue," Jenna replied. "He's too caught up in his little projects to notice." The words were a knife to the heart. When Jenna walked in later that night, she looked surprised to see me awake. "Couldn't sleep," I said, closing the laptop. "Long day?" she asked, her tone overly casual. "You could say that," I replied, my voice steady. "We need to talk. Tomorrow." Her smile faltered for a moment, but she recovered quickly. "Of course. Let's talk tomorrow." I nodded, letting her think she still had the upper hand. But tomorrow, the game would change. The next morning, I woke up early. My mind was a flurry of scenarios, each more intense than the last. Jenna stirred beside me, her face serene as if nothing was amiss. I envied her composure, her ability to act so convincingly while weaving a web of lies. When she left for work, I finally exhaled. This was the day everything would change. I spent the morning organizing the evidence, the texts, the emails, the photos. It wasn't just about confronting her. I needed a plan for what came next. My marriage, my company, my future, it was all on the line. Alex called around noon. I found something else, he said. There's a data transfer scheduled for tonight. Jenna's phone is set to upload files to a cloud server. My guess? She's delivering another batch to Darren. Can you intercept it? I asked. I can try, Alex said, but it's risky. If they notice, it could tip them off. Do it, I said without hesitation. Jenna came home that evening, her smile as radiant as ever. Busy day? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. You know how it is, she replied breezily, pouring herself a glass of wine. She didn't notice the tension in my voice, or the way I watched her every move. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it quickly before setting it face down on the counter. I leaned back, waiting for the right moment. At 9 p.m., she excused herself to the bedroom, claiming she needed to catch up on some emails. I followed a few minutes later, lingering in the hallway to listen. Her voice was low, but I could make out snippets of her conversation. Yes, everything's ready. No, he has no idea. It'll be sent over tonight. My stomach churned. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. I stepped into the room, startling her. Who are you talking to, Amin? I asked, my tone calm but firm. She froze for a split second before recovering. Oh, just Michelle, she said, forcing a smile. Really? I said, crossing my arms. Because it sounded like you were making plans with someone else. Her smile faltered. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery. Her face went pale as I showed her the pictures from the restaurant. You and Darren seem pretty close, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. For a moment, she was speechless. Then her expression hardened. You were spying on me? Don't turn this around on me, I snapped. You've been lying to me for months. About your work trips, about your relationship with Darren, and about the files you've been stealing. Her eyes widened. What files? Don't play dumb, I said, tossing her laptop onto the bed. I have everything, your emails, your texts, even the data you sent to Ascentech. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Her mask cracked. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. You don't understand, she stammered. Then make me understand, I said. Why would you betray me? Why would you risk everything we've built for him? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. Her sorrow didn't feel genuine. It felt like a last-ditch effort to manipulate me. You don't know what it's like, she said finally. Living in your shadow. Watching you succeed while I'm stuck playing second fiddle. Second fiddle? I repeated, incredulous. You're a top manager at one of the biggest firms in the state. What more could you possibly want? I wanted to matter, she said, her voice breaking. Darren made me feel important. He listened to me, valued my ideas, and used you to sabotage me, I interrupted. She flinched but didn't deny it. The confrontation stretched late into the night. Jenna alternated between denial, justification, and outright anger. She accused me of neglecting her, of being obsessed with my work. But her words rang hollow. By the time she stormed out of the room, I felt empty. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd loved, was gone, replaced by someone I could barely recognize. I called Alex one last time. Intercept the files, I said. Make sure they never reach Ascentech. You got it, he said. As I hung up, I stared at the darkened room, wondering what tomorrow would bring. The fallout was inevitable, but one thing was clear, Jenna's betrayal would not go unanswered. The next morning, the tension in the house was suffocating. Jenna avoided me, her usual confident demeanor replaced by wary silence. I didn't press her. I needed her to believe she still had control, at least for a little while longer. Alex called just before noon. It's done, he said. I intercepted the files and replaced them with decoys. If Darren tries to open them, all he'll see is corrupted data. Good, I said. And what about Jenna? Can she trace this back to us? Unlikely, Alex replied. She'll probably assume Darren's system failed. That was a relief, but it didn't ease the knot in my chest. Sabotaging their plans was only the first step. I still had to decide how far I was willing to go and how much I was willing to lose. That evening, Jenna returned home with a forced smile. She'd clearly spent the day rehearsing her next move. "Hey," she said, her tone unnaturally casual. "Can we talk?" I nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice soft. "About us, about everything. I know I've made mistakes, but I want to fix this. I want us to work." Her words were carefully chosen, her eyes pleading, but I wasn't buying it. "Do you?" I asked, leaning forward. Because last night, you didn't seem too concerned about fixing anything." She flinched, but quickly recovered. "I was upset. I didn't mean half of what I said." "Which half?" I shot back. Her face reddened, and for a moment I thought she might finally tell the truth. But instead she sighed and looked away. "You're not perfect either, you know," she said, her voice tinged with bitterness. I laughed bitterly. "So this is my fault now? You betrayed me personally and professionally, and somehow I'm to blame?" "I didn't plan for this to happen," she said defensively. "Darren offered me an opportunity. I thought I could help him and us at the same time." "Help us?" I said, incredulous. "By stealing my work and handing it to my competitor?" Her silence spoke volumes. The days that followed were a blur of confrontations and revelations. Jenna admitted to everything: her affair with Darren, her role in the data breach, even the plans they'd made to undercut my company's next launch. "Why didn't you just come to me?" I asked one night, my voice raw with frustration. "If you felt unimportant, undervalued, why didn't you say something?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You wouldn't have understood. You were so focused on your work, your success. I felt invisible." Her words stung, but they didn't excuse her actions. "I built this company for us," I said, my voice breaking. "Every late night, every sacrifice, it was all for us. And you threw it away." The final blow came when Jenna's betrayal reached Darren. I wasn't sure how he found out, whether Jenna confessed or if Alex's decoys tipped him off. But it didn't matter. He dropped her the moment he realized she was no longer useful. "He blocked me," she admitted one night, her voice trembling. "He won't return my calls or emails." "I'm not surprised," I said coldly. "Darren got what he wanted. You were just a means to an end." Her face crumpled, but I felt no sympathy. She had made her bed. With Jenna's alliance with Darren severed, I finally had the leverage I needed. I consulted a lawyer who helped me draft a separation agreement. Jenna wouldn't get a dime from my company, and she'd have to leave the house. When I presented the papers to her, she broke down. "Please," she begged. "We can fix this. I'll do anything." I shook my head, my heart heavy but resolute. "You already did enough, Jenna. This isn't something we can come back from." The day she moved out, the house felt emptier than I expected. I sat in my office, staring at the photo of us on our wedding day. We looked so happy, so full of hope. It was hard to reconcile that version of us with the reality we had become. But as painful as it was, I knew I had made the right decision. Jenna's betrayal had been a wake-up call, a reminder of what mattered most: my company, my integrity, my peace of mind. The house was quiet after Jenna left. Too quiet. It felt like the life had been drained from it, leaving only the echoes of what we once were. I spent the first few days in a haze, replaying every conversation, every moment where I might have missed the signs. Work became my refuge. With Jenna gone, I poured myself into my projects, determined to salvage what she had tried to destroy. The breach had set us back, but Alex and I worked tirelessly to strengthen our systems and recover the stolen data. Every keystroke felt like a step toward reclaiming control. But at night, the loneliness crept in. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text her, forgetting for a fleeting moment that she wasn't part of my life anymore. Then reality would crash back in, a cold reminder of everything she had done. One evening, as I sifted through old emails, a new one popped into my inbox. It was from Jenna. "I need to talk to you," it read. "Please." I stared at the screen, my emotions warring between anger and curiosity. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her the next day. She arrived looking fragile, a shadow of the confident woman I had known. Her once perfect composure was cracked, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she began, with her voice trembling, "but I need you to understand. I never meant for any of this to happen." I thought I was helping Darren, helping myself, but I lost sight of everything that mattered. Her words hung in the air, but they didn't move me. You didn't just betray me, Jenna, I said finally. You betrayed yourself. You destroyed everything we built. For what? A man who discarded you the moment you stopped being useful? She flinched, but nodded. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Her regret might have been genuine, but it wasn't enough. I've already started the divorce process, I said, my voice steady. This isn't something we can fix. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't argue. She knew it was over. After she left, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the empty seat beside me. For so long, Jenna had been my partner, my confidant. Now she was just a stranger with a familiar face. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and damage control. Jenna's actions had put my company at risk, but with Alex's help, we managed to mitigate the fallout. The decoy files had worked. Ascendtech announced a project similar to ours, but it was riddled with flaws. At a press conference, I unveiled our latest software, a product that incorporated improvements I had made during those sleepless nights. It was a resounding success, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, I could persevere. Yet, the victory felt hollow. I had saved my company, but the cost had been steep. My marriage, my trust, my sense of stability all shattered. I started therapy, hoping to make sense of everything that had happened. My therapist encouraged me to focus on the future, to rebuild my life on my terms. Slowly, I began to see the light at the end of the tunnel. One evening, as I sat in my office, a message popped up on my screen. It was from Alex. You did it, he wrote. You came out stronger. I stared at the words, letting them sink in. He was right. Despite everything, I had survived. And for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Months of relative calm had passed, and life was beginning to take shape again. I focused on work and personal projects, slowly rebuilding myself from the chaos Jenna had brought into my life. Yet her shadow lingered, not in my heart, but in how I viewed the world. Trust was no longer something I gave easily. One day, during an otherwise ordinary workday, my phone buzzed. The name on the screen stopped me cold. Jenna. I stared at it, debating whether to answer. Against my better judgment, I swiped to pick up. Hello? My voice was steady, but my chest tightened. There was a pause. Then her voice came through, tentative and soft. Hi, I wasn't sure if you'd answer. What do you want, Jenna? I kept my tone neutral, refusing to let her hear the emotions roiling beneath the surface. I need to talk to you, she said. It's important. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. What could you possibly have to say that I haven't already heard? It's not about us, she said quickly. It's about Ascendtech. Darren, he's not who you think he is. A flicker of curiosity sparked through my annoyance. Go on. I made a mistake working with him, she said, her voice trembling slightly. He's dangerous. I didn't realize how far he was willing to go until recently. I think he's planning something that could hurt you, your company. The words hit me like a jolt. Jenna wasn't someone I trusted anymore, but the fear in her voice sounded real. What exactly is he planning? I asked, my mind already racing through scenarios. I don't know all the details, she admitted, but I overheard him talking about your next project. He knows about it. Somehow, he's found a way to get insider information. Anger flared within me. How do you know it's not from you? You've already betrayed me once. Maybe you just forgot what you handed over. That's not fair, she snapped, then immediately softened. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I swear, this isn't from me. He has someone else feeding him information now. Her words left a bitter taste in my mouth. If what she said was true, then the betrayal went even deeper than I'd thought. Why are you telling me this? I demanded. Because I owe you that much, she said quietly. And because Darren doesn't care about anyone but himself. I didn't want you to be blindsided. I didn't respond right away, my thoughts spinning. If Jenna was right, then Darren was still a threat, and whoever his new informant was, they were operating from within my company. Fine, I said finally, I'll look into it, but don't call me again, Jenna. Whatever debt you think you owe me, consider it paid. The line went silent for a moment before she murmured, "Goodbye." I hung up and sat in the quiet of my office, my mind churning. Jenna's warning was unexpected, but I couldn't afford to ignore it. Darren had already tried to sabotage me once. I couldn't let him succeed again. I reached for my phone and called Alex. "We might have a problem," I said. "I need you to dig deeper into Ascendtech, and I need to know if anyone in our team is feeding them information." "On it," Alex replied without hesitation. As I ended the call, I felt the weight of the fight ahead. Darren thought he could outmaneuver me, but he didn't realize one thing. I wasn't the same man I was when Jenna first betrayed me. I was ready for war. I had always believed that once Jenna was out of my life, the chaos she brought with her would dissipate like smoke. But Darren's shadow loomed larger than I had anticipated. The call from Jenna wasn't just a reminder of her betrayal. It was a warning of something far more insidious. Alex and I dove into damage control the moment I ended that call. I shared Jenna's vague yet alarming claims about Darren and his supposed insider information. "If Darren has someone on the inside, we need to flush them out," Alex said, his voice hard with determination. "We've reinforced our system since the last breach, but if someone is feeding him intel directly, encryption won't stop them." "How do we root them out?" I asked. Alex's fingers flew over his keyboard, his face illuminated by the blue glow of his monitors. "I've got a few ideas," he said. "For starters, I'll monitor internal communications for anything suspicious. I'll also set up a honeypot, some decoy data that looks enticing but irrelevant. If someone accesses it, we'll know." It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was a start. Darren had already tried to cripple my company once, and if Jenna's warning was accurate, he wasn't finished. The following week passed in a blur of tension and subtle paranoia. Alex worked tirelessly behind the scenes, combing through employee activity and setting traps for our potential mole. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my projects and determined to keep moving forward despite the looming threat. On Thursday, Alex called me into his office. His expression was grim. "I think we've got a hit," he said, gesturing for me to sit. He pulled up a series of logs on his screen. "One of our engineers, Ethan, accessed the honeypot data late last night. He downloaded everything." My stomach sank. Ethan was one of our brightest developers, someone I had personally recruited and trusted implicitly. The idea that he might be working against us felt like another knife to the back. "Are we sure it's him?" I asked, clinging to the hope that there was some other explanation. Alex nodded. "The logs are clear. He used his credentials to access the files. But that's not all. Check this out." He brought up a second set of logs showing outbound network activity. Ethan had uploaded the honeypot data to an external server just minutes after downloading it. "That server belongs to Ascendtech," Alex said. My fists clenched, and I forced myself to take a deep breath. "Do we have proof that Darren's involved?" "Not directly," Alex admitted, "but the timing and the server ownership make it obvious. Ethan's our guy. Confronting him was inevitable, but I needed to do it carefully. If I acted too rashly, Darren might realize we were onto him, and I couldn't risk giving him any advantage." Later that day, I called Ethan into my office. He entered with his usual easygoing demeanor, his boyish grin disarming as ever. "You wanted to see me?" he asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. I studied him for a moment, my emotions swirling beneath the surface. Was this the same person I had trusted with some of our most sensitive projects? "Ethan," I began, keeping my tone even, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." His smile faltered slightly. "Sure, what's going on?" I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the desk. "Have you been in contact with anyone from Ascendtech?" The question landed like a hammer. Ethan's eyes widened, and he stammered, "Ascendtech? No, why would I—" I cut him off. "Don't lie to me. We have logs showing that you accessed sensitive data and sent it to a server owned by Ascendtech. This is your chance to come clean." His face drained of color, and he looked away, his jaw tightening. For a moment, I thought he might deny it again, but then he sighed heavily. "Okay," he muttered. "I screwed up. Darren approached me a few months ago. He said he just wanted some insights into our processes, nothing major. I didn't think it would hurt anyone." "You didn't think stealing proprietary data would hurt anyone?" I snapped, my voice rising. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Ethan's head dropped, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "He promised me money, a lot of it, I've got student loans, medical bills for my dad. Uh, I just, I needed the cash. His excuses only fueled my anger. So you sold out the company and me for a paycheck? I didn't think it would go this far, he said weakly. I stood, my hands gripping the edge of the desk. You've put everything I've worked for at risk. Do you understand that? Everything. Ethan flinched but said nothing. You're fired, I said coldly. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out and we'll be pressing charges. He looked up, panic flashing across his face. Please, don't do this. I'll fix it. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. It's too late for that. I said. As security led him out of the building, I felt a mix of satisfaction and weariness. One threat had been neutralized, but the war with Darren was far from over. That evening, Alex confirmed that the decoy data Ethan had sent was never accessed by Ascendtech. It seemed Darren was still unaware of our countermeasures. But how long would our advantage last? The battle lines were drawn, and I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Ethan's betrayal left a bitter taste in my mouth. Even as I signed off on his termination and initiated legal action, I couldn't shake the disappointment. The damage was contained, but the situation was a stark reminder of how vulnerable my company had become. Darren had planted doubt and division among my team. It wasn't enough to weed out one mole. I had to ensure no one else could follow in Ethan's footsteps. The following week, I called an all-hands meeting. My employees shuffled into the room, their faces a mixture of curiosity and unease. Trust had been shaken, and it showed in the tension that lingered between us. I stood at the front of the room, scanning the faces of people I had once considered more like family than coworkers. We've been through a lot recently, I began, my voice firm but steady. And I know trust has taken a hit. That's on me. I brought Ethan into this company because I believed in him, and he let us down. But let me be clear, this company is built on integrity. We can't succeed without it. The room was silent, every eye fixed on me. We're taking steps to make sure this doesn't happen again, I continued. Stronger security measures, closer oversight, but none of that matters without trust. I need to know that we're all here for the same reason, to build something great. If anyone isn't on board, now's the time to walk away. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and for a moment, I wondered if anyone would take me up on the offer. But no one moved. I nodded. Good, let's get back to work. As the team dispersed, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to rebuild what Darren and Jenna had tried to tear apart. Later that day, Alex called me into his office. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes from too many late nights. I've been digging into Darren's operations, he said, gesturing for me to sit. He's ramping up something big. Rumors of a product launch, heavy recruitment from rival companies, including ours. It's clear he's trying to hit us where it hurts. What kind of product? I asked, leaning forward. Alex shrugged. Hard to say. He's playing it close to the chest, but if I had to guess, he's using what he got from Ethan to fast-track a knockoff of your next release. The thought made my blood boil. Darren was everything I despised. Ruthless, dishonest, and willing to exploit others for his gain. But he had underestimated me before, and I wasn't about to let him win now. We need to be ready, I said. Let's tighten up our timelines. If we launch before he does, we can cut him off at the knees. Alex nodded. I'll make it happen. Over the next few weeks, the office was a hive of activity. My team worked tirelessly, pushing deadlines and perfecting every detail of our upcoming product. The atmosphere was intense, but there was a renewed sense of purpose. We weren't just working to succeed, we were fighting to protect what we had built. Amid the chaos, I couldn't escape the feeling that Darren wasn't done yet. His moves were calculated, his reach extensive. If he had planted one mole in my company, who was to say there weren't others? To ease my mind, I asked Alex to conduct a full audit of our internal communications. He resisted at first, worried it would alienate the team, but I insisted. If there's anyone else feeding Darren information, we need to know, I said. The audit uncovered nothing suspicious, but it didn't stop the gnawing doubt in the back of my mind. Darren had played his hand well, leaving me constantly looking over my shoulder. The pressure peaked on a Friday afternoon when I received an unexpected call. It was Jenna. What now? I asked, my patience worn thin. I found something, she said, her voice tight with urgency. Something you need to see. I hesitated. Trusting Jenna felt like walking into a trap, but curiosity got the better of me. What is it? It's a document, she said. Darren's been keeping a record of everything, his plans, his connections, even the people he's paid off. If you can get your hands on it, it's enough to take him down. Why are you telling me this? I demanded. Because I made a mistake, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't realize how dangerous Darren was. He's not just coming after you, he's coming after me too. This is my way of making it right. Her fear sounded genuine, but I wasn't ready to take her at her word. Where is this document? It's on his personal server, she said. I don't know how to access it, but I thought you might. The call left me reeling. If Jenna was telling the truth, this document could be the key to ending Darren's schemes once and for all. But breaking into his personal server was a risk, a line I wasn't sure I was willing to cross. I called Alex and told him everything. It's a gamble, he said. If we're caught, Darren could spin this against us. But if that document exists and we can get it, it could be the smoking gun we need. I weighed my options, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Darren had already taken so much from me. My trust, my peace of mind, my marriage. If this was my chance to take something back, I wasn't about to let it slip away. Do it, I said finally. Get me that document. Alex nodded, determination flashing in his eyes. Consider it done. Alex worked quickly, using every tool in his arsenal to access Darren's personal server. The process was painstakingly slow, every step requiring precision to avoid detection. As he worked, I hovered nearby, my nerves fraying with each passing hour. This was our best chance to expose Darren, but it was also a high-stakes gamble that could backfire spectacularly. Almost there, Alex muttered, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I nodded, though my stomach churned. The risk weighed heavily on me, but the thought of Darren facing consequences for his actions kept me grounded. Finally, Alex leaned back in his chair. Got it, he said, a hint of triumph in his voice. He opened the files, and the breadth of Darren's treachery became clear. The document was a meticulous record of his operations. Bribes, stolen data, blackmail, and even details of how he had used Jenna and others to sabotage competitors. It was damning evidence, enough to dismantle Ascend Tech and destroy Darren's reputation. This is it, Alex said, scrolling through the files. This is what we need. But as we delved deeper, the stakes became even higher. Darren hadn't just targeted my company. He had been systematically undermining others in the industry, leveraging his connections to climb to the top. His actions weren't just unethical, they were criminal. What's the play? Alex asked, turning to me. I thought for a moment. Simply releasing the information wouldn't be enough. Darren was powerful, and he'd undoubtedly have a team ready to spin the narrative in his favor. We needed a strategy that would ensure he couldn't recover. We take this to the authorities, I said finally, and we make sure it goes public. If Darren tries to retaliate, he'll be fighting a battle on two fronts. Alex nodded, already pulling up contacts for legal and media teams. The next few days were a whirlwind. We compiled the evidence, working with a lawyer to ensure it was airtight. At the same time, I reached out to trusted journalists who had reported on corporate corruption in the past. They were eager to expose Darren's schemes, and we provided them with everything they needed. As the story broke, the fallout was immediate. News outlets ran headline after headline detailing Darren's corruption. Regulators launched investigations into Ascentech, and Darren's allies scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. For the first time in months, I felt like I was no longer on the defensive. Darren's empire was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But the victory was bittersweet. While Darren faced the consequences of his actions, I couldn't ignore the damage he had caused. My marriage was over, my trust in others shattered. Even with Darren out of the picture, rebuilding would take time. One evening, as I sat in my office reviewing the day's progress, a notification popped up on my screen. It was an email from Jenna. I saw the news, it read. I'm glad you stopped him. I just wish I could have done more to help. I stared at the message for a long time before closing it without replying. Jenna's regret was too little, too late. With Darren out of the picture, my company began to heal. The team rallied, their morale bolstered by our shared victory. The product we had worked so hard to protect launched successfully, earning rave reviews and solidifying our position in the market. But for me, the journey was far from over. Darren's betrayal, Jenna's duplicity, and Ethan's treachery had left scars that wouldn't fade overnight. I realized I couldn't move forward without addressing the toll these events had taken on me. I began seeing a therapist, something I had resisted for far too long. At first, the sessions were uncomfortable, reliving the pain, the anger, the sense of betrayal, but gradually I started to let go of the weight I had been carrying. My personal life also began to change. I reconnected with friends I had distanced myself from during the chaos, and I found solace in simple pleasures: weekend hikes, cooking new recipes, even trying my hand at photography. Slowly but surely, I rebuilt a life that was mine alone. One day, months after Darren's downfall, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a letter from Jenna, along with a small wooden box. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," the letter read, "but I wanted to leave you with something that reminded me of what we once had. The good parts, before everything went wrong." Inside the box was a photo of us from our early days, taken on a trip to the mountains. We looked so happy, so carefree. For a moment, I felt a pang of nostalgia, but it was fleeting. I placed the box in a drawer, deciding to keep it, not as a reminder of what I had lost, but as a testament to how far I had come. Life went on. The company continued to thrive, and I found myself rediscovering passions I had long set aside. Max, my scruffy little rescue dog, became my constant companion, a reminder of the resilience I had found in the darkest moments. Looking back, I realized that Jenna's betrayal and Darren's schemes, as painful as they had been, had forced me to grow in ways I never imagined. They had taught me to value honesty, to protect what mattered, and to find strength even in the face of overwhelming odds. As I stood in my office one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Despite everything I'd survived, I had rebuilt, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next.